Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NBC Charlotte Sports Podcast. I'm WCNC Sports Director Nick Carboni. Quick one for you this week. We're just a couple of weeks removed from Clemson's ridiculously dominating national championship win over Alabama. We talked to Eric Boynton from the Spartanburg Herald-Journal. He's been covering the Tigers for a long, long time, and he's seen their run up until this point to perhaps being the greatest college football team ever. We discussed that. Is Trevor Lawrence ready for the NFL right now? If he could come out, and lots more. So here is my conversation with Eric.
What is your take on the best team ever talk with this team?
Yeah, it's so tough. It's funny when they talk about now we've seen Alabama. Remember, this is the fourth straight time that we've had kind of a week to be around Alabama and kind of really get into them and then seeing them play and meeting in the playoffs. You're going to see Alabama at their best. You're seeing them at season's end. They've been relatively healthy as Clemson. So everybody talked about this Alabama team, the way they were going through people and just killing everybody earlier in the year, that this might be the best team of all time. And again, with the way it was almost like Nick Saban's got his typical Alabama team, and the huge difference is he's finally got a quarterback. He's never had anything close as good as Jalen Hurts was, led him to a title, led him to the brink of another title against Clemson. He was a one-dimensional guy. And then you bring in this Tua guy that sees the field, fearless guy, good, decent running skills, and just, arguably the most accurate passer that we've seen come along. I mean, he missed three passing. Had three incompletions against Oklahoma in the previous week. And I know Oklahoma's defense is awful, but you have just three incompletions on a semifinal playoff game. I don't care who it's against. That's pretty remarkable. So that was about the best team of all time. You're looking at Alabama in that way. The defense was down a little bit. So for Clemson to beat them, the first FBS team, or the first team since like Penn in 1897, Division I team anyway, to go 15-0 and win that, it's hard to say. I mean, this defense has to be right up there. You're going to see all four of those defensive linemen, the starters from Clemson, they're all going to go easily in the first two rounds. You might see three of them go in the first round and maybe even in the top 20, top 25. But, it's just so hard to say. And you got Trevor Lawrence back there as a quarterback. It's as spectacular as he's been, and he certainly was at his best on Monday night. He's still just a freshman. I mean, and their best receiver out there was a freshman, Travis Etienne, the ACC Player of the Year as a sophomore. So, the best may be yet to come, although it's really going to be hard to duplicate the talent level they have on defense this year. But like I said, it's hard to have a real opinion. I think you got to put them right up there, but are they better than some of those early Miami teams that put like 100 guys into the NFL? Or, I'm old enough to even go back to those, Tom Osborne as a young kid for me, Tom Osborne, Nebraska teams that, were just rolling over people with great defense and the wishbone and everything else. It's just really hard to compare eras and teams, but certainly you got to put Clemson in the discussion for sure.
Yeah, I would love to see Clemson play those old Nebraska teams and try to defend that triple option. But
that'd be fun, and I'll tell you what, man. Brent Venables used to say their great defensive coordinator that his most sleepless weeks when, out of the year when he first got there was when they had to play Georgia Tech, and they were option. They have absolutely dominant. Now Georgia Tech again, even when they're decent, Venables they held them to like their two lowest all-time running totals in the Paul Johnson era. And they'll go out there even if they lose the game. I mean, the Citadel put up 275 with their wishbone against Alabama when they lost. So it's, as you just mentioned, it's really tough to defend. But boy, I think Venables now is like, the option this week. I feel pretty good about the defense that he's got right now, because he's got a lot of really, really fast, smart guys that could really study that plan. But no, that would be spectacular. I would love. I would pay great money if they could somehow do some kind of a simulation on the field. I'm sure we're maybe a decade away from them to beat him with something like that. That would be great.
It's closer than it feels.
Exactly right.
Do you've covered this game, really, if we want to call it this game between these two teams for the last 4 years, and this Clemson program for longer than that. Do you sense that the transfer of power in college football is complete to Clemson, or do we still have to find out on the field?
Well, I think we've still got at least a little bit, if not a lot, to find out. And interestingly enough, we had the champions press conference this morning with Trevor Lawrence, Trayvon Mullen, the cornerback who was the outstanding defensive player of the game, and then, of course, Coach Sweeney. And somebody brought up the dynasty word to Sweeney and said, are you guys at the point now, you've won 2 titles in 3 years, you've made it to 4 straight playoffs. Some of the other numbers, Alabama's got 11 10-win seasons in a row. Clemson's got 8 straight now of at least 10, which is second to Bama. They think they're tied for the same amount of weeks. It's like 60 consecutive weeks in the top 10 in the AP. So, I mean, these guys have pretty much elevated themselves to 1A and 1B over the last couple of years. And now that you add that second championship to Clemson, you can certainly say that they're on equal footing with Alabama. But Dabo was quick to say, listen, man, they had 5 championships in 11 years coming into this one under Saban. And you got to say that they stand alone right now. And he said, we're far away from a dynasty. So we've got to add another championship, another couple of championships. And Dabo's always about a sustained consistency. That's what his main goal is. And he's been terrific in building his program around that and the focus they have. And they don't go out there and put up a clunker anymore. I mean, Clemsoning was a term that was in the vernacular for a few years because they'd have a really good team, and then they'd run out there and Tommy Bowden get fired the week after losing to an average Wake Forest team. That was the end of his career at Clemson because they would always throw up 1 or 2 stinkers against teams that they're double-digit favorites against, and now that focus is so good that it's just been remarkable. So he was quick to kind of dispute a dynasty word. I would say right now, I mean, they are really primed, Nick, to really do some great things. And they've got Trevor Lawrence for 2 more years. There's a lot of guys. Mel Kiper came out and said if he was eligible for the NFL draft right now at his age after 1 year, he'd be number 1. I mean, and there's no doubt about it. So that's saying something. And so you got to think, and you should see some of the guys they have coming up. A lot of people are going to point to, wow, they're losing the aforementioned guys. I said all 4 of those defensive linemen are all going to be high NFL draft picks. They've got some remarkable talent, and a few of the guys had a chance to flash a little bit this year coming up behind them. So the way they've recruited, what they're doing over there, the way they run their program, it's kind of a new age program. Saban's kind of the stern taskmaster and and all that kind of stuff. At Dabo's the goofy, got the dance routines in the locker room and kind of the folksy sayings. He's got this kind of folk hero type persona about him, and kids really love to come play for him. So right now, I mean, to me, we could look back on this in 2-3 years, maybe at the end of next year, and say that this game was indeed the passing of the torch from Alabama over to Clemson, as Clemson taking over as every year they're the team that everybody else is chasing, such as the Crimson Tide has been for the last decade.
You're making me skip down on my Trevor Lawrence questions because of what you said about Mel Kiper there. Could Trevor Lawrence play in the NFL right now, tomorrow, at 19 years old?
Sweeney said today that he could, and I'll tell you what, the funny thing is we got to remember he didn't become the starter until week 5 this year. I mean, they let Kelly Bryant, the incumbent starter who went 16-2 when he transferred out of Clemson. He was 16-2 as a starter and filling the shoes of Deshaun Watson. So that's not easy. But he was the guy, and of course you're going to give your senior the benefit of the doubt. In week 2, they snuck by a pretty good Texas A&M team in one of the tougher environments in college football down there at Kyle Field. It's loud, it's crazy. And Kelly Bryant won them that game. They've been switching back and forth on several series each, playing pretty much even snaps. For the second half, Lawrence looked a little shaky, and they went with the experienced guy. And Bryant, I'm not sure they beat Texas A&M in week 2 with Trevor Lawrence playing the entire ball game. So early on, but once they got him in there, I mean, and Sweetie absolutely now made the right choice. He just gets better and better and better. He's 6'6". He's 220 pounds. I mean, I've been doing this for, a while now and seen a ton of football. I've never seen a kid this young with an arm like that. I mean, he could throw those out balls like the NFL guys do with that extra zip to where, when the guys are coming out of their break and they turn and the ball's on them. Or those little quick quick outs where, the other quarterbacks, such as Kelly Bryant, pretty good quarterback, but his ball takes a little time to get out there. So by the time it gets out to like a 5-yard pass in the flats, the defender's already there and it doesn't go anywhere. Such zip on the ball and accuracy on a Lawrence throw that the guy gets it and he's able to catch it, and all of a sudden he can make a move and get around that defender. So, and then the way he sees the field, he's a smart guy, such a humble kid too. I mean, he just seems to really have it all. And, right now, he certainly is ahead of where Deshaun Watson was as a freshman. He certainly looks better than Watson does. And they're a little bit different because, of course, Watson's a little bit quicker, makes a little bit more, plays with his legs, and maybe can extend plays even earlier in his career more than Lawrence could. But Lawrence is underrated as a runner. He's got pretty good speed for a guy that runs, like a baby giraffe. He's got those long, loping legs. But, man, he is just uber talented, and could he walk in right now and say starting next year and win a starting job? I mean, that might be a little too much to ask, but with his progression over just the course of the season, if you give this kid another summer, it's going to be scary how good he's going to be in college next year. Wouldn't surprise me if he could go in and at some point, midway through the NFL next year, like week 7 or something, step in for a guy and actually be a productive NFL player. I really think he's that good.
Yeah, and you have to believe that Dabo made that decision when he did with that game against that team in mind, knowing he'd probably be in that situation. Okay, so Trevor Lawrence, he's got 2 more years of college eligibility that he's got to get out of the way right before he can go and be in the NFL. But the microscope is already on him, and it's just going to keep getting closer and closer to him. So what kind of kid is he? What are we going to see from him as the spotlight is now on Trevor Lawrence for the next 2 years, on the field, off the field, in season, off season?
Well, the impression that we've all got here is that he's the exact same type of young man, kind of personality-wise, work ethic, humbleness, down to earth, rootsy, plays for all kind of plays for all the right reasons, to use a cliche, as Deshaun Watson. And if you're that's special. I mean, Watson, none of it. I think we were all shocked that Watson fell to 13th in the draft. I remember watching that draft and going, Mitch Trubisky. Really, number 2, and then when the Chiefs traded up, and certainly they knew what they were doing when they traded, they traded up a couple of spots, and when I called my boss, I said, okay, let's get ready, to get this out there. It's going to be Deshaun, and it was Patrick Mahomes. And of course, Mahomes, you can't argue with that. He's been better than Watson, at least in this first year. But Watson, just such a humble kid. I mean, just the nose to the grindstone, and all this attention doesn't bother them, and it doesn't look like an act. Every once in a while you get a kid that comes through and say, well, he's a nice, humble kid, and I don't know, you just kind of see a little sign and maybe some cracks in the veneer where, I don't know, man, this kid kind of seems like he's putting on a little front, when that camera comes on. We don't really see any of that with Lawrence. I mean, he does all the right things, says all the right things, comes from a great family. He's a guy that committed as I think right at the end of his sophomore year to Clemson, never wavered. There was never stories about how he's going to take this visit, that visit. I mean, he was just locked in to coming to Clemson. And he handled the Kelly Bryant thing brilliantly. I mean, he was up there and he just went about his business, never said I should maybe be on the field. And we had another guy there, Chad Kelly, who was fighting some other guys for a job. And he'd tell you every week that he deserved to be the starter at Clemson for the couple of years he was there. But you never heard any of that. And then when Bryant left, with the elegance, for lack of a better term, that Lawrence handled that situation, both with the media and apparently behind the scenes with his teammates. We've, of course, talked to a lot of his veteran teammates about him behind the scenes. And, Lawrence just handled that as good as you could handle it, because that could have been a very explosive situation, because Kelly Bryant was beloved in that locker room. He was a winner. Like I said, 16-2 as a starter. They were all behind that kid, and here comes this other, much hyped freshman. And the seniors, it's going to take a lot for them to all of a sudden back this guy, but that they all backed him instantly. And a lot of that came from the way he handled that, like, well beyond his years as far as maturity.
Okay, Eric, I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Okay.
You're a theater guy. It says so on your Twitter profile. Love the theater. So Dabo Swinney reminds you of which great character from the stage? His journey, his story, where he started, where he is now. Oh,
wow, that is a major, major curveball. Man, well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna go the easy way out. This may be a huge stretch, but it also may work because it's one of the more famous plays ever. It's arguably my favorite, and that's maybe you could go with maybe like the kind of maybe in, several characters of the play Rent.
Okay.
Kind of if you're familiar with that, it's kind of set in the 80s. People that had various problems where they had various illnesses, or they had drug problems and depression problems and just all kinds of stuff coming on. And Dabo didn't have those personally. He comes from a rough background. His father was an alcoholic and an abusive father, and then Dabo's told the story's been out there many times of Dabo was a kid sitting out on his roof, going out his bedroom window because he could try to get away from his parents arguing, and went to Alabama. His parents divorced, and went to Alabama, and his mother and him were roommates when Dabo was in college because they didn't have the money to really send him to college as a walk-on, and to also be able to afford to live. So he was. I mean, how many people have been roommates with their mother, while on campus? So it's a pretty remarkable story. So like I said, you threw me a pretty good curveball there. So I would say, and in Rent, they all kind of came together. A number of the various bohemian type characters in New York City in the early 80s, and kind of a number of them. Some of them didn't make it, but there was a number of them that kind of came through their worst times and went on to various levels of success. So I would maybe, since you put me on the spot, maybe say that Dabo came through a lot, kind of went through the grind, and kind of emerged on the other end in great shape.
Eric, I think there's more than 525,600 minutes till next season, but
yes, exactly.
I'm not great at math, though.
Hey, fantastic reference there. I'm going to give you an A+ for that one. It is outstanding.
Many thanks to Eric, and you can find him on Twitter at Eric J. Boynton. He also covers the Carolina Panthers, as you heard there, too, so he is a great follow for Charlotte area sports. That's going to do it for this episode of the NBC Charlotte Sports Podcast. We'll have lots more and lots of good stuff leading up to the Super Bowl and, of course, the NBA All-Star Game right here in Charlotte in a month.